Chapter 6. The Mission to Velmor. The dead spire was quiet when Malvex awoke. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that follows a distant tremor. The air in his private chamber tasted of static, charged, unsettled. He sat up slowly from his meditation platform, eyes narrowing, his body instinctively reaching out to the vast currents of the force. Something was moving, something old. He wrapped himself in his cloak, the hem brushing the cold obsidian floor, and stepped out onto the narrow stone balcony overlooking the Malachor wastes. The wind stung against his face, but he barely noticed. His focus was elsewhere. He reached deeper, through ash and memory, through buried wars and quiet scars. And there it was, a pulse, a flicker of light within darkness, faint, dormant, but awakening. A voice not heard in 10,000 years, a pre-schism signature. Malvex's breath caught, not in fear, but awe. The sensation was delicate, layered, unlike anything he had felt since his earliest training. It was not Sith, not Jedi. It was older than division. It pulsed like the memory of something sacred and dangerous. He turned away from the balcony and moved swiftly to the inner sanctum, a vault room beneath the spire lined with star charts, encrypted records, and psychic imprints he had spent a lifetime decoding. The room was quiet, lit by the flickering glow of suspended star maps rotating slowly around a holocenter. Each projection represented a region of the galaxy where the Force had once surged like a storm. Malvex's hand hovered over a particular sector on the galactic map. The stars dimmed as his concentration sharpened. Velmor, a quiet world, largely unremarkable in recent centuries, known for dense forests, lost ruins, and a fragile monarchy that barely registered on galactic stage. An outpost of old knowledge, a graveyard of forgotten wars. But deep beneath its surface, he had heard rumors, whispers in pirate cantinas, fragmented notes in smuggled Jedi texts, a forgotten structure buried beneath the verdant plateau. He activated a sensor array keyed to ancient Sith signatures. At first, the screen pulsed softly with noise, ambient distortion, then a spike. Sharp, pure, the console hummed. Ancient glyphs flickered along the margins. The coordinates triangulated on a single ridgeline deep within Velmor's southern continent. A disturbance, not wild, not explosive. It was focused, rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. Calling. Malvex's hands clenched around the edge of the console. An ancient holocron, he realized. One untouched since before the Great Schism, before Sith and Jedi had ever named themselves enemies. A relic from a time when the Force was not divided, only interpreted. He turned slowly from the console. Only one question remained. Would he go alone, or would he send Kyel? Malvex found Kyel in the spire's upper cloister, kneeling before a shattered window that overlooked the endless, shifting desert. The younger man was deep in meditation, the wind gently tugging at the edges of his dark cloak. His breathing was slow, even, focused. But his head turned slightly as Malvex approached. "You felt it," Malvex said. Kyel opened his eyes. "I did. The world is Velmor. The source is ancient. Older than the code." Kyel rose to his feet, calm, alert. "Why is it waking now?" "I don't know," Malvex admitted. "But it speaks with the voice of a time before our war, and it's calling through the Force." Kyel studied his master for a long moment. "You think it's dangerous?" "I think it's true." Truth. That word hung heavy between them. Not power, not dominance. Truth. They stood in silence for a moment, the broken glass whispering with wind. Above them, Malakor's twin moons bled faint light into the clouds. Then Malvex said, "I want you to go." Kyel raised an eyebrow. "Not us. If this is what I believe, then it may not speak to me. I have chosen my path." "But I haven't." Malvex's voice was soft. "You still walk between." Kyel looked out across the desert. The wind carried the scent of dust and time. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. "When do I leave?" "Now," Malvex said, "before others feel what we have felt." That night, under a starless sky, Kyel departed Malakor alone. His ship, a sleek obsidian vessel once built for Sith infiltration, rested in the shadow of the spire's eastern ridge. As he approached, lights along its hull activated with soft pulses. The ramp lowered in silence. He paused at the threshold, turning to look one last time at the jagged towers of Malakor. Behind him, a world of pain and transformation. A crucible. Ahead of him, the unknown. He stepped aboard, the ramp closing behind him. In the cockpit, he entered the coordinates Malvex had given him. The Navy computer responded with a low chime, calculating the route to Velmor. Kyel sat at the pilot's seat, fingers hovering over the ignition. His eyes closed briefly, and in the quiet, the Force whispered to him again, "Go, learn, decide." He opened his eyes and launched into the stars. Beneath the forests of Velmor, something ancient stirred, waiting, listening. And now it had been heard. The dead spire was cold. Malvex stood alone in the central observatory, where massive slabs of obsidian glass overlooked the endless, silent plains of Malakor. The air was still, thick with ash and frost. Distant winds whispered through the upper towers like ghosts reluctant to rest. In the darkness, the crimson glow of the planet's core pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat beneath stone. The force around him shifted like a storm beneath still water, subtle but charged. A tremor in the galactic current. Something ancient had stirred on Velmor, and its pulse echoed across the stars like a forgotten name. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a ripple of danger. It was deeper, resonant, like a memory that refused to die. He had felt it before waking, not in a vision, but in the marrow of his bones, in the silence between breaths. Kyel entered the observatory without a word. He did not bow. He no longer needed to. Malvex turned, robe trailing across the polished obsidian like smoke. The firelight cast sharp shadows on his face, deepening the lines time had carved. He studied Kyel for a moment. No longer a boy, not quite a man. Not an apprentice, but something different, something in motion. "There is something waking on Velmor," Malvex said. "Not Jedi, not Sith. Older." Kyle's expression remained calm. "A holocron." Malvex nodded. "Possibly. From the time before the schism. Before the Force was fractured by dogma. Its voice, it resonates differently, like breath before speech." Kyel stepped forward, folding his hands behind his back. "You want me to retrieve it?" Malvex studied him for a long moment. Not as a master measuring a student, but as a man deciding whether to let go of what he had shaped. "Yes, you will go alone." The words hung in the air like judgment. Kyel said nothing. Malvex's tone hardened. "You will not engage, not unless you are attacked. This is not a battle, not a trial. You will locate the source, retrieve it, and return." He paced slowly as he spoke, the hem of his robe dragging whispers from the floor. "You must be invisible. No interference, no imprint. Enter like shadow, exit like smoke." A pause, then, quieter. You must not be tempted by it. Ancient knowledge speaks in half-truths. It flatters the seeker. If this is what I believe, it may test you, not with challenge, with invitation. Kyle's voice was steady. Then I'll let it. Malvex's gaze flickered, almost approval, almost concern. I'm sending you not because you're strong, he said, but because you haven't been broken the way I have. It may still listen to you. The words surprised even him. They tasted like confession. I've survived trials older than most tombs, he continued. I've pulled wisdom from the mouths of gods and monsters, and yet I cannot hear this one, not clearly. But you move between, you listen. That may be enough. Kyle nodded. When do I leave? Malvex turned to the hollow map embedded in the stone wall. Velmor spun slowly into view, a green world beneath a silver mist. Forests, mountains, wounds hidden beneath beauty. Immediately. A moment passed. The chamber crackled softly as a gust of ash-laced wind struck the outer glass. He didn't say goodbye. He never did. But as Kyle turned to go, Malvex's voice followed him, softer than before. Fragile, like the edge of something unspoken. Remember, the point is not to fight. The point is to hear. Kyle paused only for a breath. Then he was gone. The door slid shut behind him. And for a long time, Malvex stood in the darkness alone, listening not for Kyle's footsteps, but for the voice that had called across stars. The journey to Velmor was not long by galactic standards, but to Kyle, it stretched like an echo, slow, deep, and filled with questions. The ship was silent. No droids, no crew. Just the faint hum of the engines and the occasional chirp of navigation systems recalibrating mid-course. He stood at the viewport, watching the blur of hyperspace stretch across infinite black. The stars had long since become familiar companions, unchanging, unjudging. But now even their light seemed to narrow in anticipation. This was not just a mission, not to Kyle. It was a crossroads, a chance, a moment unclaimed by any order, by any doctrine. A fragment of time he could shape with his own intent. He didn't believe in fate, not as the Jedi taught it. The idea of destiny forged through purity had always felt fragile to him, like glass designed to shatter under scrutiny. And he had seen too much of the Sith's obsession with power to believe control alone could bring clarity. Power without wisdom, he had learned, was only noise. But this holocron, it might offer something else. Not dominance, not peace. Understanding, truth, untouched by dogma. He spent much of the flight in meditation, not the rigid postures the Jedi favored, nor the brutal sensory deprivation drills of the Sith, but something quieter. Centered, eyes open, spine loose, listening. To the hum of the ship, to the Force, to memory. He sat cross-legged in the center of the dimly lit cargo bay, lit only by the subtle glow of the navigation displays overhead. The floor beneath him vibrated softly, each pulse of the hyperdrive like a heartbeat syncing with his own. He thought of his family, his sister's last scream as she shielded him, his brother's hand disappearing into smoke and fire. The days of hunger in the ruins, when he had clung to life with fingers bloodied from digging through collapsed shelters. The slavers who tore him from the ashes. The pit masters of Vurin who sought to turn his pain into spectacle. Tarsa's laughter, brief, bright, and gone far too soon, her blood painting the sands. And then Malvex, not savior, not father, something stranger. Sculptor of scars, a man who taught him how to bend without breaking, how to hold fury like a blade without letting it consume him. Kyle did not forgive easily, but he did not hate blindly. And Malvex had earned more than hatred. He thought of the Jedi, not as the Sith taught him to, but as he had seen in fragmented texts and crumbling recordings. Warriors of light, keepers of calm, bound by a code that denied the chaos of feeling. He remembered the words of a forgotten Jedi master he once read. Peace is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to remain still within it. That had stayed with him, more than the Sith's chants of fire, more than the Jedi's quiet disapproval. He believed the holocron might contain something different, something that had come before division, before orders, before war, something true. Between meditations, he wandered the narrow corridors of the ship, running diagnostics, inspecting systems, anything to keep his hands from idling too long. But always, his thoughts returned to the mission. The instructions were clear. Do not engage. Do not fight unless forced. Take it. Leave. And yet, Kyel knew, truly knew, that nothing ancient ever offered itself without cost. Whatever lay buried beneath Velmor's canopy would not part with its secrets willingly. Not because it feared theft, but because it demanded intent. As Velmor's system came into view, Kyel returned to the cockpit. A pale green world swirled below, wrapped in silver clouds and streaks of soft blue ocean. Its surface was uneven, dense forests, jagged ridges, wide valleys lost to time. The sight struck him, not with awe, with familiarity. He had never been there, but he knew it in the way he knew the shape of a shadow before it fell. The Force whispered, as it always had, not in commands, but in presence. He watched it grow closer with the slow reverence of a pilgrim approaching a shrine. He whispered more to himself than to the Force. I'm not here for power. I'm here to understand. And the Force did not answer. But it did not push back. It listened, and Kyel felt ready.